Most anglers assume that if you want to fish at distance, you need a 12-foot rod, but I don't think that's true. So today I'm going to see just how far I can push my 9-foot setup with a few little tweaks. Wow, 27 wraps plus 2 feet. That's a fair old chuck with a 9-foot rod, isn't it, with a baited rig? So the lake we're at today is quite silty, it's quite shallow as well. So the technique I'm going to have to use in order to get any presentation at all, especially on this kind of setup, is I'm going to feather and trap it. So I am going to lose a little bit of distance because I'm going to be stopping the lead in flight before it enters the water. But as long as I stop that lead, I'm 100% sure that I'm going to be fishing. Wow, that was not elegant, but we're feathered, we're trapped, we're in the water, and we're there. But I'm going to measure that distance so that I know exactly what I am achieving. So that's the rig as I've wound it back in. I've been testing this setup for well over a month now. Never wound back one of these rigs tangled at all. No frap ups, the hair is not twisting. So that tells me that as long as I land the rig, that 0.45 is all I need for the range that I'm fishing with this material. The other thing I wanted to check is how this little cut down rig is working here. So I just give that a little bit of a bump. Perfect. That's exactly how I want it to work. Just a little shake and he's off. So I would never normally be using distance sticks for this sort of fishing because I really don't care actually how far I'm fishing, to be honest, but I'm just doing this to explain how far this setup is going. So that's 4, 5, 6, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 20 and a half. So that's a 9-foot scope, 3.5 pound, 20 and a half wraps with a single 18mm bait and a 3.5 ounce inline. The main line, that's the 15-pound armour line, 0.35 all the way through. So there's no leader, no nothing. Just a real kind of basic, go anywhere, do anything setup. So I just want to walk you through my inline lead setup today. This is 0.35 armour line and I've tied that with a 5-turn uni knot directly to the top of some 40-pound Klingon. I've got a 30cm length of the Klingon, that's just a ready-made solid PVA bag leader, 3.5 ounce 99g inline distance lead, and then what I've done, these leads come with a plastic insert and a little tail rubber. I've removed the plastic insert and that's an original rubber, and I've actually cut that down. If you can see the difference in length there, I've taken about 4mm off, and what that enables me to do is this will cast a very long way without jamming up. So what I do is I pull that cut down tail rubber fully into there, and then when that comes under maximum casting load, is less likely to jam up. So there's a small amount of resistance to pull that swivel out. The other system worked, but under extreme load, there was just a bit too much shock force for my liking. I'm just tweaking, I'm just experimenting, I'm just adjusting things for my needs. The only downside with this setup is that you can't use it with tubing. The tail rubber actually stays in there, and then the tail rubber has to safely pass over that knot, which it does so. So it's a perfectly safe setup. It's just a little modification for using inline leads at absolute maximum range. So if you want to have a go at this, the important thing I've found is that you have to poke that cut down tail rubber in there first before you pull the swivel, because if you do it the other way around, it's just going to jam and lock in the hole. So if you do it like that, then you've got a nice little bump and run force, which is absolutely perfect for the fishing that we're doing. So for hook bait today, let's give these a bit of a shake. So these are an 18mm hardened hook bait, and all I've done is I've poured 10mm of the live booster onto those, and I'm simply just going to wipe off the excess so I don't get myself in an awful mess when I put my hook bait on. And we're just going to hair rig that in the conventional way, and all I'm using today is my normal mono hair rig made with 0.45 mono, and that's just the armour line. It's designed as a main line, but it makes great hook link, and it's perfectly tangle resistant when combined with an inline lead, even when I'm smashing it as hard as I can. And I'm going to do a double dip technique, so I'm going to pour it back into a little pot of the booster, sit it back in my tub, and then I'm going to make it even more attractive by dipping it into some booster powder. And the reason why I'm going to all this trouble is that I'm going to be fishing with this and only this. No freebies, no PVA, no stringers, no mesh, no bag, just a single high attract hook bait that's as attractive as I can possibly make it while remaining as aerodynamic as possible. If I do that in the right place at the right time, in the right water, it's going to do me a bite. This is a hand sharpened hook, so I absolutely need to put hook grease on. There we go. Then all we're going to do is whack it out, stick it on the buzzers and see if we can nick a bite. The next setup what we're going to use is a 12-foot rod with exactly the same size of reel, style of reel, same main line, same lead, same bait size. We're going to give that a fling and see what a 12-foot rod setup exactly the same compared to a 9-foot rod can achieve. Well, it's been a while since I've given these 12-footers a thrash, so might be a bit rusty. We'll see how it goes. Not bad. So we've clipped that up there, we'll wind him in and see how far that float. Rig came back 100% tangle free as per. Let's give it the bump test on this lead. Yeah, that's exactly what I want. 25, 26, 26 and a half. 26 and a half plays 20 and a half, so five wraps more. That's a considerable difference. So I'll be honest with you, I'm a bit rusty casting these 12-footers. They feel completely different to the scopes. I use the scopes pretty much wherever I can, but I gave it a good thwack, probably not my furthest cast ever. So there's no surprise whatsoever that a 12-foot rod will outcast a 9-foot rod. There is a direct correlation between your rod length and how far you can cast. And the exact maths on that very much depends on how good a caster you are. A professional caster will always outcast a novice like me. It doesn't really matter what he can do or what I can do. All that matters is what you can do. Now, in terms of test curve is more related to the size of the lead that you can use. Now, I've chosen to use a 3.5 ounce lead for both of these tests, and to be honest, 3.5 ounce is a match for the 3.5 pound test curve of these rods, and it's a match for my skills as well. Although these rods can just about handle a 4 ounce lead, I can't cast a 4 ounce lead any further than I can a 3 ounce. I've just got a bit more accuracy and a bit more control, and it's just a bit more manageable. So if you were using a 3 pound rod, then use a 3 ounce lead. That's the best guide. When you're choosing leads to go with your rods, you need to factor in the weight of the bait as well. Now, I know that little 18mm bait, it doesn't weigh a lot, it's only about 4 or 5 grams, so that's not going to throw the maths. If I was to put a PVA bag on there, that could make a massive difference to the setup. So it depends, are you using PVA, are you using a stringer, are you using a stick, are you putting it all in a solid PVA bag? You've got to do the numbers based on the weight of your bait, the weight of your PVA and the weight of your lead. And that number ought to correspond to the test curve of your rod. So I like a 3.5 ounce lead with a bait, that works for me, because with my technique, it's the right balance for a 3.5 pound test curve rod. If you've only got 3 pound test curve rods, then one small bait and a 3 ounce lead would be perfect. But if you want to use a PVA stick, then you might want to use a 2.5 ounce lead, because the PVA stick is going to weigh half an ounce, might weigh an ounce. You've got to work out the maths if you want to get the best from this in terms of distance casting. So what tweaks do I need to make to a 9-foot setup in order to better my best cast of 21 wraps? Right, 9-foot 3.5 pound scope, 0.45 leader, 0.28 skyline mainline, 18mm bottom bait, inline running lead. Let's see what we can do. And I stopped that. That was just a straight trap. Well, that's tight to the lead there. We'll put that in the clip. Oh, hey duckies. Right, see what we got. So I've just done 2 identical casts at 23 and a bit wraps. So with the same size lead and the same size bait, going from 15-pound line to 0.28 main line and a leader, I can gain 2 wraps. Now that might not seem like a lot, but sometimes that can make all the difference in the world. So to gain extra distance, then going to a thinner main line definitely works, but you need to add a shock leader to do it. The other way of gaining extra distance is to change hook baits. So I'm going to go from a big old 18mm hardened live system to a tiny little dumbbell wafter. This is a 10x15, so it's only presenting 10mm of frontal area to the wind. I can understand how you can be concerned that how on earth can that one tiny little bait do a bite, especially on a big lake. Well, they can. They are phenomenally attractive. Carp absolutely love them. They will find it. Yo! Okay. Stick that in the clip. 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Wow, 24 and a half. So we gained 2 wraps by going to a thinner main line and a leader, and we've gained another 1.5 wraps just by going from an 18mm bottom bait to a tiny little 10x15mm wafter. So all of these things add up, all of these things make a difference. So we're now at 24 and a half wraps, so yeah, we're pushing on for 100 yards. Right, now we're going to go for the absolute max that I can cast a 9-foot rod with a baited rig. So I've got another spool set up here. So this has got 8 pound 0.26 skyline mainline. Super fine, designed for ultimate long range performance. You can just see the leader knot there. For leader, I'm using 15 pound 0.35 skyline, which I've been testing a lot as my kind of go-to, go anywhere general purpose fishing line. It's really tough, really robust, and for me it's robust enough to do the job of a leader. So this is the setup. I have never even cast this, but we're going to give it a go and see what we can achieve. See if we can beat 24 and a half wraps. Now, I'll be honest, 8 pound mainline is pretty delicate stuff. You can only get away with this on the right kind of water. And I've been building up my confidence fishing for the last couple of years using the 0.28 skyline. I love it. It's really robust, never got bust up on it, and it's only rated at 10 pound. So this is just a shade thinner. Now I've got the confidence in the 0.28, I'm going to give the 0.26 a go. But I can only do it on the right water. So you've got to be really careful if you are considering pushing the envelope. That's a long way. Wow. Well, I've trapped that. Yeah, that's a big old cast, that is. Right, stop angle, same as all the other ones. We'll put that in the clip. That felt long. 24, 25, 26, 27. Yeah, wow. 27 wraps plus 2 feet. That's a fair old chuck with a 9-foot rod, isn't it, with a baited rig? It's impressive. So we haven't changed the rod, we haven't changed the reel. All we've changed is we've gone for some thin mainline We put a leader on there, but I'm only using regular mainline as a leader, and we've used a smaller bait. And we've gone all the way from 21 wraps right up to the heady heights of 27 wraps. That is a massive gain in distance. And I've still got the portability of a 9-foot scope ops rod. For my last cast, I'm going to put the line in the clip at 28 wraps, and I'm going to see if I can hit that clipped up mark. We do have perfect conditions today. It is still 28 wraps. Can we make it? Can we make it? Yep, kissed it. Beautiful. Amazing. So there we are. We're smacking the clip at 28 wraps with a baited rig with a 9-foot rod. One of the best things about simple little mono rigs like this is that you just cannot get them to tangle. If you mount them on a running inline lead like I've done here, off the end of a little ring swivel, 0.45 mono, I could probably get complete tangle free performance from 0.35 mono. I haven't tested that a lot, I've mostly tested this, but it just will not tangle. Even with a light bait, even without PVA, you don't need a nugget, you don't need anything. It just won't tangle. You need to have a huge amount of confidence to fish with a little rig like this, and that confidence comes from knowing that it won't tangle. So another way that I've been setting up these running in lines is, rather than doing a chopped down tail rubber, you can just use an anti-tangle sleeve like that. That's just a short tungsten one, any sleeve will do, and you literally just pull it into the end there, and I'm using a size 8 ring swivel, and if I do that, it can't be pulled too tightly home. If I pull that really hard, it still doesn't jam, it just pops out. So that's a perfect kind of go anywhere setup, or a dedicated configuration specifically for use at long range. And to be honest, it's a bit easier than fiddling around trying to cut down a tail rubber to the right length. One of the advantages actually of using a short rod, especially on a shallow venue like this, is the drop on the rod is only 4.5 foot to be 50% of the rod length anyway. And this means that I've been able to come out an extra 10 yards from the margin. So I've automatically gained 10 yards on the cast that I was going to make anyway. And if your 12-footer will only outcast your 9-footer by 25 yards, and you can make up 10 yards just by wading out a bit, then, you know, 15 yards, it's not a lot, you know, might be enough. And this is why I tend to grab the 9-footers most of the time, to be honest. And of course, if I was to put some thin mainline and a leader on this setup and use a smaller bait, that little 9-foot rod would go even further. It'd probably go as far as the 12-footer would with 0.35 mainline. So there's all sorts of tweaks and adjustments you can do in this game. So to gain more yards, we need to reduce drag. And the cheapest, simplest way of reducing drag is just to change your hook bait. Even going from an 18mm hook bait to a 10x15 wafter will make quite a significant difference to the number of meters that you can cast. It doesn't matter what your technique is, what gear you've got, just by using a smaller hook bait, you will be able to cast further. So that's the first change that you should make when you're looking to gain yards. The next change you should look at is line. If you have to fish straight through, then going from 0.35 to 0.30 will definitely make a big difference to how far you can cast. If you can use a leader, then great, use a leader and use the thinnest main line that you're comfortable using. I wouldn't really recommend that you all rush out and start fishing at range with 0.35 shock leader and 0.26 mainline, because that is super fine, and it's taken me a few years to build up the level of confidence to be able to fish like that. But I'm very happy to recommend a leader material of 0.45 and 0.28 mainline. It's robust, reliable, and you'll be able to cast a really long way. If changing the hook bait and changing the main line isn't enough, then you've got no choice. You're going to have to look at longer rods. I wouldn't really worry about swapping from a 9-foot to a 10-foot rod. that's not going to make a massive difference, but going from a 9-foot rod to a 12-foot rod, or at the extreme range, if you're going to go from a 12-foot rod to a 13-foot rod, then there are some good gains to be made if your technique is good. Now, before you spend any money or do any changes, what I would do is take a setup and I would describe that setup in detail to an AI, and I would ask it, okay, you want to cast further, what changes to make? What happens if I change the hook bait, if I change the main line, or if you change rod size? It's never going to be 100%. We did some work on this and the AI was a little bit conservative. Doing that is going to give you a much better idea of what's actually achievable with some simple changes before you spend any money at all. So for this next test, we're going to push the setup to the absolute max. We've got some 0.28 Skyline on there, and I've used some of the 0.45 Armour line, which is the 25-pound main line, and I'm using that as a leader. And then I've got exactly the same setup, same inline setup, and to make sure that this is absolutely safe, I've tested that that lead will pass over that leader knot very safely. This is why I'm using a 0.45 leader as opposed to anything larger than that, just to make sure that it's absolutely safe, just in case of a crack off. So in flight, the inline is going to go out nose first like that. The rig's going to be travelling behind it like that. And inlines really don't have a reputation for being able to cast far, and the reason for that is that the drag on the bait puts side pressure on the nose, and it means that rather than the lead travelling in a perfectly straight line as it would on a helicopter rig, it just takes a bit of a set like that. That changes the aerodynamics ever so slightly and will cause you a loss of distance. There's been some testing on this by one of the guys at Tracker, actually, a guy called Ant Corbett. He was testing 4-ounce leads, but he was testing a lead clip, a helicopter and an inline, and he was really shocked by how far an inline can cast. It outcast a lead clip, believe it or not, and it was only 5 yards shorter than his out and out distance heli setup. So he's putting an inline 180, 185 yards, which is one hell of a weight, far beyond the capabilities of an average Joe caster like me. With a little bit of technique and an inline lead, you'd be astonished how far you can cast them. Let's give this a waz. Oh, that's flying, that's flying, that's flying. Bung. Wow. That went a pretty long way, that. Right, so let's wind that in and count the turns. Now that lead was not plugged. I let it fly as far as possible, feathered it, trapped it. Right, let's do the lead bonk test. Spot on. Again, the rig absolutely 100% tangle free. The exit angle is exactly what I wanted it to be, what I always want it to be. 29. Yeah, just over 29 wraps. Not bad for an amateur caster like me, really. It's not 30 wraps, but I could get 30 wraps if I reduce the bait size. If I go from an 18 miller to a 12 miller, then I'd hit 30 wraps. That could make 5, 6, 7 meters difference in your casting, depending on how good you are. And bait weight makes a difference as well. So size for size, 12 mil wafter will outcast a 12 mil bottom bait. It won't be much difference, but there's a little difference. If you want to cast to the absolute maximum of your potential, actually the cheapest solution that you can use is just to use a smaller bait. You don't have to change your rod, your reel, your line, just use a smaller bait. Use a glugged bait, use a dip, use a powder, and just make a super attractive, high attract single hook bait and wang it out as far as you can with whatever you've got. you'll definitely be casting further than you've ever gone before. Obviously, if I had 13-foot rods, I could do even better, but 13-foot rods, you know, they are really very much a specialist tool, and I've never cast one. And I probably couldn't get the most out of one if I tried, to be honest. So 12 foot is the longest rod I've ever cast. Anglers worry a lot about fishing over the bait and the fact that the baited rig needs to be near the bait. When you're fishing zones, it doesn't make any difference. The fact is that I've got some bait out there, the fish are out at that distance, I've got some rigs out there, and it's working. So if you're fishing a spotty lake, you need to put your rigs on the bar, and the bar is at 110 yards or whatever, then yeah, you're going to need to bait up and fish accurately at that range. Or if you're fishing a weedy lake and you're trying to, you know, drop rigs into a very small specific area, and if you miss that area, then you know, you're not going to be fishing, then yeah, accuracy is everything, and you really need to match your rod, your rig setup to, you know, fish accurately and have a bait application method that is a perfect match for that setup. But if you're fishing large open water areas, even if it's not a very big lake, but you're just fishing open water and it's all pretty featureless out there, then just wang them out, spray some baits over the top as best as possible. Don't worry about there being 10, 15, 20 yards difference between, you know, where your baits are landing and where your rigs are landing. If your hooks are sharp and if your bait is good enough, it's going to work. When you're fishing zones like that, it's a completely different style to fishing 3 on the spot. I'm fishing over a very wide spread of bait. I'm often baiting a 40, 50, 60 wide yard area, 3 baits out there as best as I can. There's going to be 20, 30 yards between each rig, and there might be 5 or 10 yards between each bait. On the right water, the right time, when you're fishing a zone like that, it works an absolute charm. The carp will absolutely go in search for every single one of your hook baits and freebies, and it's only ever a matter of time before one of them absolutely melts off and you're into another Park Lake banger.
Flipping heck. That nearly...
I cannot believe how far I've just cast that. I'm looking at the other side is a very, very long way away, and I think I nearly put it over the other side. So I'm going to have to wind that back in and see how far it went, because that was the little 10 by 15 mil wafter that I said would fly a very long way, and I think the measured cast I did was okay, but it certainly wasn't any farther than the 18 mil. So let's wind that back in and see if that really is the farthest I've ever cast a baited rig. Casting is all about timing, and I just absolutely nailed the timing on that just beautifully. It went so far, travelled so fast, I lost sight of it. So I certainly didn't. It wasn't a controlled landing, but it still wasn't plugged, which is ridiculous, to be honest. And I'm sure I started feathering it when the cast was going on for so long. I'm thinking, wow, that is a very, very long way indeed. Rig's picked up some muck, but if I'd left it there, it was still fishing. Absolutely 100% tangle free, totally bomb proof, using nothing more than cheap mono. 28, 29, 30, 31. 2 foot short of 32 wraps. Got to be 120 yards plus that, which I know it's nothing compared to the professionals who are putting baited rigs 180, 190 yards, but 120 yards with a baited rig, that's a blooming long way, that is. Certainly farther than I ever need to fish, ever. So my first cast I did just over 29 wraps, and on my second cast with this setup I've managed 31 wraps and 10 feet, just shy of 32 wraps. And a lot of it is, yeah, it's the rod and the reel, but a lot of it is thanks to this line and leader combination. 10-pound mono, 0.28 mono. Yeah, it's fine and it's thin, but I've done the pull tests on this. I've tested this leader knot, and I can get 12-pound breaking strain out of a material that's rated at 10-pound, and that's phenomenal. And it turns out that 25-pound 0.45 armour lane makes a fantastic shock leader as well. And it was only done with a 3.5 ounce inline distance lead, which, are they rated for casting? Absolutely not. But get your setup right, get your timing right, they fly an awful long way. So what rod length should you use? Well, it really depends so much on the type of fishing that you're doing. If you're on a big water and you're competing against guys that are smashing rigs out to the horizon using 12 and 13 foot rods, leaders, fine lines, if they're being successful, you're being a bit nuts to take it on with 9-footers. But time and time again, 9-footers are my go-to tool. If I can take it on and be successful with 9-footers, then I absolutely will. Yeah, they're small, they're compact, they're portable. I can be a lot more mobile and a lot more active in my fishing with a short retractable rod. And you'd be amazed how far you can effectively fish with a 9-foot rod. I class myself as a rank amateur when it comes to casting. You know, the pros are doing double the distance that I can do for sure. I'm still very happy with how far I can cast a 9-foot rod. I can fish and bait up effectively with 20mm baits and a 9-foot rod. It's a good match, it's a good combination. You can catch an awful lot of carp for an awful lot of waters just fishing 85, 90 yards. You don't always need to fish 115, 120 yards. And I'll be honest, I'm a very late comer to the short 9-foot retractable rod game. Up until 3-4 years ago, I'd never used anything else for carp fishing other than the 12-foot rod. 12-foot rods was all I knew. But I'm taking my 9-footers pretty much everywhere, to the river, to my own lake, big public park lakes. Do they work everywhere I go? Yep. They're fun to play fish on. Whenever I pick up a 12-foot carp rod now, be it when I'm doing my tuitions and stuff, or when I do decide I really need to smack it one, then they feel a bit cumbersome, to be honest. I'm much more at home, it turns out, with a 9-foot rod. And because I'd never tried anything other than a 12-foot, I didn't know. I hadn't got a Scooby-Doo. Now I've got to say that for me, a 9-foot 3.5 pound rod is a super capable rod, and I can take it to loads of different waters and be successful. But given a choice, if I can get away with a 3-pound 9-foot rod, then I will do that. A 3-pound rod is a lot of fun. They're more fun to play carp on than a 3.5 pound rod, but I'm limited to lead size, and I'm often needing to use big leads, whether I'm at a park lake or whether I'm river carping. And when I'm fishing my own lake in the winter, if I hook one of my big catfish and I'm on my 3-pounders, then I'm going to get dragged all over the lake, to be honest. I think a 9-foot 3-pound rod would be my default go-to choice for anyone at any level. Just a fantastic all-round rod. Once you've mastered those, if you find yourself in a situation where you can't quite get the distance and you need to cast a bigger lead, or you're dealing with absolute beasts, then yeah, you might need to step up from there. But if you can get away with a 3-pound 9-foot rod, then you're going to absolutely love them, because they really are fantastic. For solid PVA bag fishing, there are no hard and fast rules, but you're always going to be limited by how much does the bag weigh, what test curve rods are you using. If you're using 3-pound rods, you're going to have to pay more attention in what mix you choose, what size of bags you use, and how much you fill your bags. So I'm not trying to suggest that you absolutely have to have 3.5 pound test curve rods for solid PVA bag work. You don't. It's just that you're going to have to pay attention to the size of the lead and the choice of mix that you use in the bag. If I were to fill that 100% with a dense PVA bag mix is going to be heavier and it could push your rods over the limit. So you just have to be careful. So if you're looking for the most capable 9-foot rod that will do absolutely everything, then 9-foot, 3.5 pound is the way to go. If you're looking for something that will do virtually everything, but there might be one or two situations where you find you're a bit limited on distance or lead size, then I'd still go for the 3 pounders. They're more fun to play fish on. So if you're thinking about baiting up with a thrown stick, what you've got to bear in mind is how hard your baits are. So I've got some 18mm live system here, and it's a lovely bait. It's quite a soft bait, straight out of the bag, breaks in two very easily. That's fine for spodding and spomming and the like. If I'm gentle with that with a thrown stick, I can get that 50-60 yards without any bother, but there's no way that I'm going to be able to get the 80 or 90 yards to match the distance that my 9-foot scopes will do with an inline lead. 20mm stick, long distance stick, 18mm, relatively soft bait, straight out of the bag, and a gentle little flick, they go out fine. Little bit harder, boom, that's exploded. So straight out of the bag, 45-50 yards, you won't get any more out of them than that. You need to air dry them. I've got some air dried ones here, and I've just got a fresh one out of the bag, and I'll try and crush through these with the same force at the same rate. Bunk smashed in two. Yeah, that's a pretty tough bait, that. I could break it in two, but yeah. So that's been air drying now for about 15 days, and that's going to go a very long way. I'll be able to use max energy into the thrown stick, and that bait won't explode before impact. So that's what I need to bait up 85-90 yards. Yeah, it's good. Good. Plop. Yeah, 80 yards every day of the week. So what happens if leaders are banned? You have to fish straight through, and you have to fish rig tubing. Well, obviously you can still fish with a smaller bait, and that will gain you a few extra meters. On the mainline front, what I do is I drop down from maybe 15 pound down to 12 pound, 0.30. In order to reduce the shock loading on the line, I would reduce lead size. So maybe you want to go from a 3.5 ounce 99 gram lead down to a 3 ounce 85 gram lead. It might not seem like a big change, but it will have a big effect on the maximum peak load that the mainline knot undergoes during the cast. The other thing you might want to do is to pinch a bit on the rig tubing. If, for example, you were fishing with a metre or 75 centimetres of rig tubing, pinch it down to 50 centimetres or even 30 centimetres if rules allow. Less tubing is a little bit less weight, and most importantly, less drag. And all of these things add up to gain you more yards. Right, time for a bit of maintenance. This is my short to medium range setup. It's a 9-foot scope ops, 3.5 pound. And we've got 15 pound Skyline on here, that's the 0.35. And I've had it on since the autumn. And as you can see, the line is really quite dirty. We've got some algal staining on there. It's not casting terribly well. The biggest improvement I can make to this line without changing it is just to clean it. So we're going to give it a clean and see what difference we can make. This one looks new. It's not new. That's used line. I've just cleaned it with a microfiber pad. This is the next one that we need to do, which is the old and dirty. And we're going to make the one on the left look like the one on the right. So the easiest way to do this is just with a couple of bank sticks or a distance stick. I'm just going to wrap it round there, and I'm going to walk it out as far as I can and go round another stick. So I've done 3 laps of my sticks, and you can see how clean this line is. And this line is clean because it just hasn't been fished with. I've walked out about 90 metres, 3 times 30. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take a microfiber pad, just wrap it round the line, and we're just going to run it through and walk back. You don't need to use a massive amount of tension, just wind it back slowly, and that's the amount of muck we got off. And if we look at the spool, it's looking much better. Certainly going to cast much better. And while I'm at it, I'm just going to use this cloth to clean up these rod rings as well, because if you don't clean the rings, then it's just going to put muck back on the line. The next thing we need to make sure is that the line is damage free. So I'm literally going to run this line all through my fingers to check it, and from the top of the leader all the way back. That's a bit of a kink there, that's just from routine casting. Yeah, if that feels damaged, then that would need to be cut off, but I'm okay with that. So once we've checked the last few meters, we can check the rest just by walking this back out again and running it through the fingers. So there we go, all clean and ready to fish. With regular use, mainline can get quite dirty. It can pick up all sorts of muck, silt debris, dried on algae. It makes fishing a little bit harder and a lot less fun. The easiest way to know if your line needs cleaning is to listen to it when you cast. If it sounds rattly when it's going through the rings, the best thing to do is to take some time to clean it. You can just use a regular cloth, but a microfiber cloth and water is the best tool for the job. Ideally, don't use detergents, because detergents can actually deteriorate the mainline. Don't use lens cleaning wipes or any other products. Just water and a microfiber cloth is all you need. So this is a good example of what damage we're looking for. This is actually on my spom rod, which has been set up with 15-pound Skyline mono. And yeah, I don't know what's happened to that, but I've obviously, I think I might have wrapped it up a tree or something, but that's a bit damaged there, so that needs to be cut off. So if you ever see damage like that on a spod rod or on a fishing rod, then that needs to be cut off, because that's just an accident waiting to happen. Now, chop that, find the damage. What I tend to do is look for the damage. So we've got, that's the last evidence of damage. Go 1.5 meters above that, chop that off, and then I can retie it.